My name is Amina Reed. At 28 years old, my life shattered. It was 17 inches the morning, and the screen of my laptop was the only light in my small Decatur apartment. I was trying to build a business, read analytics, from nothing, deep in a complex predictive model for a logistics client. I was literally analyzing risk metrics when my own life was about to implode. My sister, Kendra, dumped her newborn baby on my doorstep, then disappeared. 10 years ago, my sister left her newborn on my doorstep. My parents, the respectable David and Maria Reed, didn't offer help. They told me, "He's your burden now," severing the last thread of family connection I thought I had. So, I raised him. I loved him. I built a life and a fortress for us. Last week, they all came back, my sister, her new white husband, and my parents, and they're suing me for custody. They didn't just show up for a reunion. They showed up because my son's biological father, a dead billionaire, left him a $500 million Radi inheritance. They think they're coming for a payday. They don't know I've been keeping a decade's worth of receipts, and I'm about to cash them all in. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the responsible one in the family, the one who had to clean up everyone else's mess. Trust me, you'll want to see how this betrayal ends. The only sound in my apartment was the hum of the hard drive and the rhythmic lash of the April rain against the single window. It was a lonely sound I had gotten used to. Then, the sound came. It was not a knock. It was a bang. A fist hitting my solid wood door hard enough to vibrate the wall. Bam, bam, bam. My heart didn't just jump. It stopped. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I lived alone on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. No one came to my apartment at 0 inches the morning, ever. Especially not like that. The banging came again, harder this time, more desperate, frantic. Bam, bam, bam. My blood ran cold, an icy shock that started in my chest and shot down my arms. My mind instantly jumped to the most likely and, in some ways, most dreaded option. Kendra, my sister. It was exactly her brand of chaos. But the last I'd heard, she was somewhere in Florida or Alabama. The banging stopped, and the silence that followed was somehow louder and more terrifying than the noise had been. I stood in the middle of my living room, which was also my dining room, and my office, and just listened. I crept toward the door, my breath held tight in my chest. I grabbed the heaviest thing I owned from the garage sale coffee table, a thick square glass ashtray my grandfather had once used. I stood there for a full minute, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I was about to turn away, convinced I was hallucinating from exhaustion and caffeine, when I looked at the peephole. Nothing. Just the dim, flickering, fluorescent light of the empty beige hallway. But then I saw it. Wet footprints. Not just a few, but a frantic, overlapping mess of them, right in front of my mat. Someone had been there, pounding on my door with violent force. And now they were gone. Then I heard it. It was a sound so small it barely registered. A thin, high-pitched whimper, like a miserable kitten trapped somewhere. My blood, which had been frozen by fear, now ran cold with a different, sharper kind of dread. The sound was coming from outside my door, from the floor. I fumbled with the safety chain, keeping it latched. I slowly, carefully drew back the deadbolt. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the 2A. Silence. I opened the door just an inch, peering through the gap. The hallway was empty, but I looked down, and I stopped breathing. On my worn-out welcome mat, soaked from the April rain, was not a box. It was a cheap plastic baby carrier, the kind you buy at a discount store. It was faded blue, plastic, slick with rain. A thin, wet towel, not even a blanket, was draped over the top, and it was moving. The whimper was coming from inside. My fear vanished, replaced by a terrifying, purely animalistic panic. I threw the door open, grabbed the entire cold, wet carrier, and pulled it inside. I slammed the door shut, locking the deadbolt and the chain again. The apartment was silent, except for my own ragged breathing. I stared at the basket, now dripping dirty water onto my clean floor, and then I saw the note. It was not on paper. It was a cocktail napkin stuffed into the handle. The words were written in smeared black eyeliner. "Amina, I can't. You're the only one. His name is Leo. Don't find me. Kendra." My breath left my body in a single, painful rush. Kendra, my sister, my parents' perfect, broken princess. The golden child who had chosen drugs and worthless men over everything. And now she had left this. She had left him. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial the phone. I was trying to wrap the baby, Leo, in a dry towel. His tiny body was so cold, so terrifyingly still just moments before. I dialed the only number I could think of, the immaculate, sprawling home in Buckhead. The zip code that separated us was more than just miles. It was a different universe. I hadn't spoken to them in 3 weeks. Not since the last agonizing fight about Kendra, when I finally said no. I had refused to send her another $500 for rent money I knew was going straight to her addiction or to some worthless man. My mother's voice still echoed in my ear. "You're stingy, Amina," she'd said, her voice sharp and contemptuous. "You have no compassion for your own family. What has that college degree done to you? Made you cold? Cold?" They were about to prove who was truly cold. I hit the call button. The baby was screaming now, a raw, piercing sound in my silent apartment. It rang once, twice, 4 times. I almost hung up. Then she picked up. "Amina, my mother, Maria." Her voice was thick with sleep, but even half awake, it dripped with irritation. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" The question was a stinging slap, even before the real cruelty began. I couldn't form words. I just sobbed. "Mom," I finally choked out. "Mom, it's Kendra. She was here. She left her baby." I was pacing. The phone pressed hard to my ear, the baby held tight against my chest. "A newborn. He's freezing. We have to call the police. We have to find her. Mom, please." There was silence on the line. Not a what? Or is he okay? Or, we're on our way. Just dead, cold silence. It stretched for so long I thought the line had dropped. I heard a muffled sound, my mother's hand covering the receiver. I heard her hiss. "David, get up. It's about Kendra again." That single word, again, felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Then a new voice. My father, David Reed, not panicked, instantly alert, and instantly cold. "Amina," he said, his voice clipped and all business. "What did you say?" I repeated it, the horrifying words tumbling out. "Kendra left her baby on my floor. We have to call the police." "No." The word was absolute. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. "No police. I will not have the Reed family name dragged through the mud again. I will not have my business partners and our pastor reading about this in the Atlanta Journal. That girl," he spat the word out like poison, "has ruined our reputation in the church community enough." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about a person, a life, a crisis. It was about reputation. "But," I whispered, looking down at the tiny screaming face. "But the baby, your grandchild." The phone was fumbled again. I heard my mother's voice back on the line, but the sleepiness was gone. It was replaced by a voice as cold and hard as steel. The voice of finality. "She chose your door, Amina," she said, the words cutting me to the bone. "That makes it your problem. He is your burden now." "Burden," I whispered, the sound hollow. "We will tell everyone," she continued, steamrolling over my pain, "that Kendra is in a private rehabilitation facility in Europe. That is the story. Do not call this house about this again." The click was deafening. They hung up. I stood there motionless, the phone still pressed to my ear. The baby's wail was a sharp, piercing siren in my small apartment, but it was almost drowned out by the other sound in my ear. The dial tone, a long, dead, empty hum. That was it, the sound of my family severing the last thread. They hadn't just hung up. They had disconnected. They had unplugged me from the very idea of family. "He is your burden now." My mother's words echoed in the silence between the baby's cries. "Your burden." The words bounced off the walls of my cheap Decatur apartment, off the stacks of data analysis textbooks and the second-hand sofa. The words landed with the sickening thud of absolute truth. This was my role. It had always been my role. I was the responsible one, the family's fail-safe, the one who never broke, so I was the one who could be safely ignored. I was the one who got the full academic scholarship to Spelman College. I was the one who graduated summa cum laude while working 2 part-time jobs to pay for my books and rent because my parents' money was always tight. I was the one who was currently sitting on a mountain of $80,000 in student loan debt I had taken on all by myself. And Kendra, our princess, our golden child, the one they did pay for. They paid for her to attend that fancy private liberal arts college up in New England. She lasted exactly 1 year, dropping out to find herself, which meant finding a series of deadbeat boyfriends and a nasty, expensive drug habit. But did her funding stop? No. Even now, with her life in flames, I knew for a fact my father still paid the insurance on her red convertible. I was the responsible one who had to pay for my own success. Kendra was the irresponsible one who got rewarded for her failures. The baby's cry intensified, a desperate, lung-filling scream that pulled me from the memory. But it didn't pull me into sadness. A different feeling was rising in my chest, a hot, acidic rage that burned my throat. It wasn't just anger at Kendra for her weakness. It was a pure, unfiltered fury at my parents, at David and Maria Reed. They chose, in that moment, with that click of the phone, to choose their image. They chose their reputation. They chose the pristine, quiet carpets of their Buckhead home. They chose the sad, respectable lie they could tell their friends at the country club. They chose protecting the idea of their family over the actual people in it. They had abandoned us both. I will continue the script, ensuring Chapter 3 is approximately 1,000 words, maintains Amina's determined internal monologue, and follows the narrative from the outline. Viral script, he's your burden. Now Chapter 3. The choice and the $50,000 receipt approx. 1,000 words. The baby's cry, sharp and desperate, sliced right through my rage, pulling me back to the cold, damp present. It grounded me. I looked down at him, this tiny, 7-pound stranger, now wrapped tightly in my good bath towel. He was still red, his face crumpled in pure, primal need. And the logical part of my brain, the data analyst in me, screamed one word: CPS. Child Protective Services. It was the only answer that made any sense. I was a 8-year-old woman trying desperately to launch a business. I lived on instant ramen and stale coffee. I was sitting on $80,000 in student loan debt. I had no money for diapers. I had no skills for motherhood. I had no time. My entire future was balanced on a knife's edge, depending entirely on the very clients I was supposed to be coding for at that exact moment. Keeping him was not a logical option. It was a statistical impossibility. It was a risk metric I absolutely could not afford to take. This was not my life. This was not my mistake to fix. He was a burden, just as my cold-hearted mother had said. My legs felt like cement as I stood up. I gently placed him on the cushions of my second-hand sofa, surrounding him carefully with pillows so he wouldn't roll. He immediately screamed louder, his tiny body rigid with terrified protest. I know, I muttered, walking backward toward the kitchen. My hands were shaking. I just needed a glass of water. I just needed to think. I reached the kitchen, a tiny alcove with a sink and a refrigerator, and I saw it. Tacked to the corkboard under a takeout menu was a small square magnet with the number for the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services. My hands, still trembling violently, reached for my phone, which was still clutched tightly in my left hand. My thumb hovered over the keypad. One call, and I could undo this entire catastrophe. I could give him to people who were paid to handle this. I could get my life back. And then, the crying stopped. The sudden, absolute silence was more shocking than the screaming had been. I turned around, my heart pounding a furious rhythm. He was just watching me. From the sofa, his head turned toward the kitchen light. He wasn't screaming. He was just staring with these impossibly wide, dark, ancient-looking eyes. As I stood there, frozen, he made a tiny movement. One of his hands, a fist no bigger than a walnut, uncurled. He splayed his tiny fingers open. I couldn't move. I felt pulled. I walked back, my phone forgotten. I sat on the floor in front of him. I slowly, uncertainly offered him my index finger. He gripped it. His entire hand, all 5 perfect fingers, wrapped around the tip of my finger with a strength that was impossible. A grip so tight it sent a jolt straight from my hand to my heart. It was a shock, electric and warm. And in that one tiny, powerful gesture, everything shattered. The rage, the cold, hard logic, the damning data, my mother's cruel voice, all of it just evaporated. And I realized they were wrong. My parents were wrong. The world was wrong. This was not a burden. This was not a problem. This was a person. This was family. And my real family, David and Maria Reed, the ones who were supposed to protect me, they had just abandoned both of us. He had no one. And in that moment, I realized neither did I. We were the same. We were the leftovers. Okay, Leo. I whispered the name, feeling strange and perfect on my tongue. Okay. It's just you and me. We're going to be okay. The first week was a blur, a fog of formula I did not know how to mix, diapers I did not know how to put on, and a high-pitched crying sound I could not seem to stop. I had not slept in what felt like 100 years. My small apartment, once my clean, organized sanctuary and office, was now a disaster zone. It was a battlefield of half-empty bottles, unfolded baby blankets, and a profound, lingering smell of sour milk. Leo was asleep finally, a small, fragile weight in the brand-new bassinet that had cost me half of my grocery budget for the entire month. I was sitting at my laptop, the screen glaring at me, but I could not focus on the code. My client was waiting. I was exhausted, but my mind would not shut off. It kept replaying that night. The knock, the rain, the note, the click of the phone, and something did not fit. My professional instincts, the part of my brain that sees patterns in chaos, just would not let it go. I am a data analyst. My entire career is built on finding the signal in the noise, and this entire situation was noise. Kendra's disappearance, it was not just desperate, it felt clean. She had vanished from the face of the earth. No follow-up calls, no desperate texts for money, no social media trail. And my parents, their rejection was too fast. It was too scripted. He's your burden now. It was not a response spoken in panic. It was a verdict, a pre-written decision. My analyst brain told me I was missing a key variable, the catalyst. What happened in the 48 hours before she came to my door? I sat up, rubbing my burning eyes. I needed data, but I had nothing. No phone records, no access to her accounts. Then I remembered the old account, the Student Advantage checking account my parents had co-signed for me back when I started at Spelman. In case of emergency, my father had said, which I always knew really meant, in case we need to monitor your spending. I hadn't used it for years, but I had been funneling money from my freelance side contracts into it for 3 years. It was supposed to be my seed money, my escape fund for Read Analytics. I knew with a sick feeling that my parents still had access to it. My hands were shaking. I typed in the password, my old college mascot. The page loaded slowly. I expected it to be empty, or close to it. But the balance that loaded on the screen made my heart stop. It was not just low, it was almost zero. I felt the blood drain from my face. I scrolled down the transaction history past my small deposits, and then I saw it. A single-line item that made me feel like I was falling. A wire withdrawal. Not an ATM, not a debit card swipe. A formal, authorized wire transfer. The amount, $50,000. I stared at the number, my brain utterly refusing to process it. $50,000. 50,000. That was my money. That was my meager savings. That was my future. The one I had sacrificed years of sleep and social life to build. And then I saw the date of the transaction. It was not a week ago. It was not a month ago. It was dated April 4th, 10 years ago. Exactly 2 days before Leo appeared on my doorstep. My heart was no longer pounding from exhaustion. It was hammering, a sick, heavy thud against my ribs. $50,000. The number just sat there on the screen, digital and damning. It did not make any sense in the simple context of a panicked sister. I scrolled down, my mouse clicking, frantically in the silent apartment, past my small, careful deposits from freelance work. I needed the details. I needed the final, undeniable data. I clicked on the transaction line. Expand details. The page refreshed slowly. Wire withdrawal, it said. Okay, so a withdrawal. But to who? I scanned the line, looking for Kendra's name, looking for an account in Florida. Anything that would fit the miserable, pathetic story they sold me. I found the authorization line, and the whole world violently tilted on its axis. Authorized signature. David Reed. My father. Not Kendra. My father. The blood drained completely from my face, and a cold, metallic taste filled my mouth. I must have read the line 10 times, blinking, willing the letters to rearrange themselves into a lie. David Reed. David Reed. David Reed. It was not a mistake. It was not a bank error. It was the name of the man I knew better than my own. He had logged in. He had seen my desperately saved balance. And he had taken it. $50,000. That was not just a number. That was my future. That was Read Analytics. That was 2 years of late nights, skipping dinners, saying no to friends, and coding until my eyes burned. That was my money. They had not just taken some money. They had taken my money, the money I, the responsible one, had saved while they were busy paying for Kendra's rehab, which was probably just a spa and her useless convertible. The final pieces of the sickening puzzle clicked into place, sharp and painful like shattered glass. My brain, the analyst, started running the real simulation, the true timeline. Variable 1. Kendra is pregnant and desperate. Variable 2. My parents are terrified of the scandal and the ruin of their precious reputation. Variable 3. They need her to disappear quietly and quickly. Variable 4. They need money to make her disappear. Variable 5. Their responsible daughter, the one they called Cold, has an accessible emergency fund. My God, they did not just reject me when I called. That agonizing phone call was just the final, cruel step. They had planned this. They had orchestrated this entire tragedy. They had paid my sister to abandon her child. They had paid her to run. And they had used my future to finance the cover-up. They used my savings, the savings I denied myself, to protect their reputation, to keep the neighbors in Buckhead from whispering at the church bake sale. The rage that rose in my throat was so hot, so acidic, I almost choked on it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my laptop against the wall. I wanted to pick up the phone and dial that Buckhead number and unleash 10 years of bottled fury. But I did not. The analyst took over. The cold, logical part of me that sees patterns and plans for future destruction. Rage is temporary. Data is forever. My hands, still shaking, moved from the trackpad to the keyboard. I did not yell. I did not cry. I clicked print. I printed the bank statement. I saved the page as a PDF. I saved the wire transfer confirmation. I opened my secure cloud drive, created a new folder, and encrypted it. I named it Receipt, because I finally understood. This was not an abandonment. This was not a family tragedy. This was a cold, hard business transaction. And they had just made me the unwilling financier. But I had the proof. I had the evidence. I had the receipt. And I knew, with a certainty that settled the cold rage, that one day they would pay for this with far more than $50,000. 2 agonizing years went by just like that. I was 30 years old, and Leo was 2. He was no longer a tiny, fragile bundle. He was a force of nature, a hilarious, stubborn, brilliant little boy who was running me ragged. He had my sister's beautiful eyes, but he had my determination, my stubborn will to survive. My company, Reed Analytics, was still alive, but barely. It was limping, not growing. I was trying to be a full-time CEO and a full-time mom, simultaneously, which meant I was doing both jobs at a terrifying 50% capacity. And I was constantly haunted by the crushing feeling that I was failing both. My apartment was a controlled chaos of sippy cups, data entry spreadsheets, and unfinished projects. I loved my life with Leo, but I was exhausted down to my very bones. In those 2 long years, I had not seen my parents, not once, not since the night they hung up on me, the night they called their own grandson a burden. The silence from their house in Buckhead was absolute. Well, almost. I had received exactly 2 pieces of mail from them. A Christmas card one year, and then another one the next. They were beautiful, expensive cards with snowy landscapes and cold, gold foil. Inside, there was no note, no phone call, no check, nothing. They used to send Kendra, not even a handwritten signature, just the pre-printed embossed words from David and Maria Reed. It was the ultimate performance. It was their cold way of telling the postman they were a normal, loving family, while simultaneously screaming at me that I was still nothing. I kept the cards. I filed them away carefully in the same encrypted folder as the bank receipt. More evidence. More pain. Then, on a random Tuesday in November, just before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed. I was desperately trying to get Leo to eat green beans. I glanced at the caller ID, and my heart just stopped. Maria Reed, my mother. After 2 years of complete, total silence, she was calling me. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost threw the phone. Leo, seeing the sudden fear on my face, threw his green beans on the floor. My hand was shaking violently as I swiped to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice weak, small. "Amina," she said. Her voice was bright, casual, as if we had spoken just yesterday, as if she had not ruthlessly disowned me over the phone while I held a freezing newborn. "I was just thinking, it's been so long. You really should stop being so childish." I was literally speechless. I was being childish? She was the one who funded the abandonment. "This childishness has gone on long enough, Amina," she continued, her voice full of fake, magnanimous grace, as if she were the bigger person. "It's Thanksgiving. It's time for family. You should bring the baby to dinner. Your father wants to see him." I almost laughed out loud. It was such a blatant, absurd lie. Your father wants to see him. My father, David Reed, had never once asked about my well-being, let alone the child he had called a burden. My father cared only about his golf score, his reputation, and his respectable image. He had made his choice clear. This was not an olive branch. This was a command performance. They wanted to pretend to their buckhead friends that they were doting grandparents, and they needed a prop. They needed Leo. My blood boiled. The analyst in me, the part that had saved the receipt, screamed, "It's a trap! Hang up!" But then I looked at Leo. He had a green bean stuck to his cheek, and he was grinning at me. He was 2. He was innocent. He did not know about my parents' coldness. He did not know about the $50,000 theft. He just knew love. And didn't he deserve to know his grandparents, even if they were them? A tiny, foolish, stupid part of me, a part I thought had died on the phone 2 years ago, whispered, maybe if they saw him, maybe if they held him, maybe that would be enough to change their cold hearts. "Okay, Mom," I said, my voice quiet, hating myself for the tiny sliver of foolish hope I heard in it. "We'll be there." I drove to Buckhead on Thanksgiving Day, my stomach twisted in anxious knots. I spent an hour I did not have dressing Leo. I put him in his best outfit, a tiny button-down shirt and little khaki pants I had bought just for this day. I combed his curls until they shone. I wanted him to look perfect. I wanted, just for a second, to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them he was not a burden, but a blessing. The hope I felt was stupid. I knew it was stupid even as I felt it. When my mother, Maria, opened the massive polished oak door of their Buckhead home, I knew instantly it was a mistake. The house smelled exactly as I remembered. Expensive polish, roast turkey, sweet potatoes, and cold judgment. She was wearing a silk blouse, gold jewelry, and pearls just to carve a turkey in her own home. She did not hug me. She did not smile. She did not even look at me. Her eyes went straight down, past my face, to the 2-year-old standing at my knee. Leo, being 2, had pulled his shoes off in the car. His little white socks were clean, but they were just socks. My mother's face tightened into that pinched, disappointed look that had defined my entire childhood. "Amina," she said, her voice a low hiss of disapproval. "You could not even bother to put shoes on him? He looks unkempt. Not hello, not welcome, not it's been 2 years. Just brutal criticism right there on the doorstep," I felt. My shoulders slump, the stupid hope instantly dying. He pulled them off in the car. "Mom," I said, my voice already small, defeated. "He's 2. She just sniffed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Well, try to control him. Your father had the floors polished. The dinner was torture. It was a performance for an audience of 3. My father, David, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, radiating cold success. He was in his element, carving the turkey, talking loudly about his golf game, and he praised Kendra. Oh, how he praised the daughter who was not there. "We received a postcard from Paris," he announced, beaming at my mother, who beamed back. "Kendra is doing so well. She's thinking of taking a cordon bleu cooking class. So refined. It is just wonderful to see her finding her passion." I stared at the crystal water glass, my throat tightening. Paris. That was the expensive lie they had built over my stolen $50,000. A cooking class. She was probably in a ditch in Florida. But, here in Buckhead, she was refined. My father then turned his cold attention to me, his smile fading. "And you, Amina, still doing that little computer job?" The word computer job was so deeply demeaning. He knew I ran my own company. He knew I was a data analyst, but he reduced it to nothing a child's hobby. "I thought with a child," he continued, "you would want something more stable, something with benefits." I was trying to cut a piece of turkey small enough for Leo, my hands shaking with a quiet, furious rage. "It's going fine, Dad," I muttered. Leo, sensing the suffocating tension in the room, did what 2-year-olds do. He banged his little fork on the table, and then with a joyful squeal, he flipped his plate. It was not a big spill. A single spoonful of mashed sweet potato landed on the edge of their priceless Persian rug. My mother screamed. It was not a yell of concern. It was a sharp, horrified shriek, as if Leo had set the house on fire. "Oh my God, Amina. That carpet is ruined. Can you not control that child for one single minute?" I was instantly on my knees, my face burning with crushing humiliation, desperately trying to scoop up the orange mush with a napkin. Leo, terrified by the scream, burst into tears, a high-pitched, frightened wail. "That is it!" My father's voice cut coldly through the crying. He put his napkin down, his face a mask of pure disgust. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Leo. "Amina," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Get your things." I packed our diaper bag in silence, my hands shaking, Leo sobbing against my shoulder. As I walked to the front door, my father was there, holding out a foil-wrapped plate of leftovers. He held it out to me, not making eye contact. "Here, do not say we did not feed you." And then he delivered the final, definitive blow. "And next time you are invited," he said, his voice low and cutting. Asterisk, asterisk. "If you decide to come, you come alone. That baby is. He is too much noise. This is a respectable house." He shut the massive oak door before I could even reply, leaving me and my son standing in the cold, severing us completely. 3 more years went by. Just like that, 3 years of absolute unbroken silence from Buckhead. I was 33, and Leo was 5. He was a bright spark of a boy, obsessed with dinosaurs and learning to read. My company, Read Analytics, was finally taking off. I had clients. I had contracts. I had 80-hour work weeks. Life was a frantic, exhausting, beautiful blur of client meetings, data models, kindergarten drop-offs, and macaroni and cheese. I was succeeding not despite Leo, but because of him. I was building a fortress for us, one line of code at a time. I was bone-deep tired, but we were happy. The crisis started on a random Tuesday. Leo was fine in the morning, but by the afternoon, the school called. "He feels warm." By the time I picked him up, warm was a terrifying understatement. He was burning. By 8 p.m., his fever was 104, a number that 8 p.m. does not look real on a digital thermometer. He was lethargic. His neck was stiff, and he was crying in a way that I had never heard before. A high-pitched, painful wail that terrified me. I called the pediatrician's after-hours line. I described the symptoms. The doctor did not hesitate. His voice was urgent, cutting through my growing panic. "Amina, I don't want to scare you, but a fever that high with a stiff neck, I'm concerned about meningitis. You need to get him to Eggleston immediately." Meningitis. Eggleston. Immediately. The 3 words landed like a bomb. Eggleston was the serious hospital, the one you never wanted to go to. I do not remember the drive. I do not remember parking. I just remember the fluorescent hell of the emergency room at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I was surrounded by people, by crying kids and exhausted parents, but I had never felt so completely and totally alone. They took him back, a nurse whisking him away, and I was left in the waiting area, my hands shaking so hard I could not fill out the forms. My phone felt like a 1,000-pound weight in my hand. I was a 33-year-old CEO. I was a competent, successful woman, but in that moment, I was just a terrified girl. I scrolled through my contacts, past my clients, past my lawyer, past the kindergarten, and I found the number, Maria Reed. I had not deleted it. After 3 years of silence, after the respectable house comment, after everything, my thumb, shaking, pressed the call button. I did not even think. It was a reflex, a deep, primal, stupid need for my mother. She picked up on the second ring, her voice clear and alert, as if she were at a book club. "Amina." The word was a dam breaking. I just shattered. "Mom," I sobbed, the sound torn from my chest, my voice cracking. "Mom, Leo, he's really sick. They said it might be meningitis." I was pacing the waiting room, earning annoyed glances. "We're at Eggleston." I'm at Eggleston, Mom, and I'm scared. I'm really, really scared." There was a pause, but it was not a worried pause. It was not the sound of a mother absorbing a shock. It was a cold, calculating, annoyed silence. I heard the faint, distant tink of silverware on a china plate. I heard the murmur of other voices in the background, social laughter. She was not just at home, she was busy. I heard the distinct sound of her hand covering the receiver, the shift in acoustics, and then her muffled, irritated hiss to someone else in the room. David, she whispered, her voice sharp. It's Amina. There was another pause. It's about that child, she hissed again. That one word again, that child, as if my 5-year-old son, her only grandchild, was not a person, but a recurring technical problem, a broken appliance, a bill she did not want to pay. Then her hand moved. Her voice came back on the line, but the polite socialite tone was gone. It was replaced by that cold, hard buckhead voice, the voice she used on incompetent waiters and clumsy gardeners. Amina, she said, her voice sharp like ice. I am in the middle of my annual women's club luncheon. I am the host. There are 30 women in my living room. I cannot just leave. I could not process the words. My brain simply refused. What? I whispered, my voice cracking. A luncheon? Mom, did you hear me? They said meningitis. I don't care about the luncheon. I am at the hospital. I am alone. I need someone. Please. I was begging. I hated the sound of my own voice. The pathetic, pleading tone. Please, just Dad. Where is Dad? Can he come? I heard her sigh, a long, drawn-out sound of pure, heartless exasperation. Your father, she said, as if explaining something simple to a very stupid child, is exactly where he is supposed to be on a Tuesday afternoon. He is golfing. He has clients on the course from New York. We cannot just drop our entire lives, Amina. Every time you overreact. My son was behind a closed door with doctors. His temperature was 104. They were worried about his brain, and I was overreacting. I am not overreacting, I yelled, my voice finally breaking completely, causing a woman in the waiting room to look up at me. He is sick, Mom. I am scared. Amina, you always do this, she said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion. You are always dramatic. You know how children are. They get fevers. 99% of the time, it is just a virus. It will be fine. You need to learn to handle your own responsibilities. I need my mom, I cried, the last of my pride gone, stripped bare. No, she said. Her voice was final, absolute. You need to stop being so selfish. You made this choice. You chose him. Now you handle it. I have guests. Click. The dial tone hummed in my ear. She had done it again. She had hung up on me. I stood there in the middle of the Eggleston emergency room, my phone pressed to my ear, listening to the long, dead hum. She hung up on me. My 5-year-old son was somewhere behind a set of double doors, potentially with a life-threatening illness, and my mother hung up on me because of a luncheon. The sound of the ER, the crying babies, the beeping machines, the overhead announcements, it all rushed back in, deafening me. I was completely, utterly alone. I slid down the cold, sickly green wall, and just sat. I sat on the germ-covered floor of the emergency room, surrounded by strangers, and I felt invisible. Those 12 hours were the longest of my life. I watched the digital clock on the wall tick over each minute, each one an eternity. 12:30, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I bought a coffee from a vending machine that tasted like burnt plastic and chemicals. I answered a client email on my phone, my hands shaking, frantically pretending my world was not falling apart. Every time a nurse or a doctor walked through the double doors, my head snapped up, my heart leaping into my throat. Amina Reed? No, not yet. We're still waiting on the blood work. I must have paced a marathon in that tiny, cold waiting room. I thought about my mother's words, overreacting, selfish. You chose him. I had chosen him. And in doing so, I had been unchosen by them. The finality of it settled on me, heavy and cold as a lead blanket. Finally at 3:00 the morning, a doctor with kind, exhausted eyes came through the doors. Amina, for Leo. I leaped up, my legs numb. Yes, is he okay? My voice was a terrified croak. He gave me a small, tired smile. He is going to be fine. It is not meningitis. I almost collapsed. The relief was so absolute, so total, it buckled my knees. Thank God, I whispered. He continued. It's a severe bacterial infection, but we've started him on a high-dose IV antibiotic. He's responding well. He's sleeping. You can see him in a few minutes. I just nodded, the tears I had been holding back for 12 hours finally breaking free. I did not cry for sadness. I cried because the terror was over, and I had survived it alone. We spent 2 days in the hospital. I slept in a plastic chair. I held his hand. I read him dinosaur stories. My business almost imploded. I pushed back 3 client deadlines. I ate vending machine crackers for dinner. And I did it. We did it. We got to go home. We were back in our safe place. Leo was asleep in his own bed, clutching his stuffed triceratops. I was sitting on my sofa, covered in hospital grime, feeling like I had run a marathon. My phone pinged. A text message. It was from Mom. My heart stupidly gave a little jump. Was it an apology? Was she checking in? I opened it. The text read, "Amina, heard Leo just had a little cold after all. So glad you didn't overreact too much. Hope he's feeling better. By the way, your father just signed that big New York contract he was working on. We're all going to our favorite restaurant tonight to celebrate. You should have seen his golf game." I read the text, and then I read it again. A little cold, overreact, celebrate. They did not just not care, they were rubbing it in. They were celebrating a golf game and a business deal while I had been in a living hell, terrified my son was dying. They had not called. They had not checked. They just sent this victory lap. I looked at the words. I thought of the dial tone in the ER. I thought of the 12 hours on the cold floor. I thought of luncheon. I thought of selfish. And I felt nothing. The part of me that had been waiting for them to be parents, the part that had foolishly called them, had finally died. It was over. I was done. My thumb, steady now, opened my contact list. I found her name, Maria Reed. I pressed the info button. I scrolled down. Block this caller. I pressed it. Block contact. Confirmed. Then I scrolled down to David Reed. Block this caller. Confirmed. I dropped the phone on the cushion. I was done. 3 more years went by. Just like that. 3 years of absolute, unbroken, blessed silence from Buckhead. I was 36, and Leo was 8. He was a bright spark of a boy, obsessed with dinosaurs and learning to read. My company, Reed Analytics, was finally taking off. It was no longer a limping, one-woman operation. I had clients. I had contracts. I had 80-hour work weeks. Life was a frantic, exhausting, beautiful blur of client meetings, data models, kindergarten drop-offs, and macaroni and cheese. I was succeeding, not despite Leo, but because of him. He was my center, my fuel, my constant motivation. I was building a fortress for us, one line of code at a time. The stability was real. We were safe. We had moved out of that small, dark Decatur apartment. We were in a good school district, in a nice 2-story brick house in Alpharetta. It had a backyard, a tire swing I had hung myself, and a small home office where I was finally truly my own boss. But there was one last cloud. A small, irritating piece of paper. A legal technicality that felt like a crack in the very foundation of the fortress I had built. Kendra's name. Her name still sat on his birth certificate. It was a lie. It was a ghost in our happy home. Every time I had to register him for school or a new doctor or sign him up for soccer, there it was. Mother's name, Kendra Reed. Father's name, unknown. And I, Amina Reed, was just a line item at the bottom. Guardian. I was not his guardian. I was his mother. I had been his mother through the 2 a.m. feedings, the fevers, the first day of kindergarten, the nightmares. And now, at 8 years old, Leo was starting to notice. He could read. He would point at the paper. "Mom, why does it say her name? Why not yours?" I finally made the call. I sat in the leather-backed chair of a family law office. My lawyer, Jessica Hayes, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who handled my business contracts, looked at the file I had prepared. "I want to make it official, Jessica," I said, my voice firm. "I want to adopt him fully. I want his last name to be Reed. I want my name to be on that line." Jessica nodded, her face serious. She looked at the fodders, meticulously prepared timeline I'd prepared. The bank statement from 10 years ago, the $50,000 receipt, the call log from the hospital, the unopened Christmas cards. "Amina," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is not a hard case. This is a simple one." She started ticking off the points. "It has been 8 years. Has Kendra Reed ever contacted you?" "No," I said, "not once. Has she ever sent $1 of support? A birthday card?" "Nothing," I confirmed. "And your parents, David and Maria?" I just laughed, a short, bitter sound. "No, the opposite." Jessica leaned forward. "Amina, What you have here is what the state of Georgia calls a clear case of abandonment. Legally, this is straightforward. She has not contacted the child in over a year. She has provided no support. She has, by all legal definitions, forfeited her rights. The word forfeited felt powerful. It was exactly what had happened. So we file, Jessica said, all business again. We file a petition to terminate her parental rights based on abandonment. After that, the adoption is a formality. I felt a crushing weight I had not even realized I was carrying lift completely off my shoulders. It felt safe. It was the final step. I had built the life. I had built the company. Now I was just signing the paperwork to make the fortress legally complete. I signed the retainer. We filed the petition. I was 36, Leo was 8, and we were finally, officially going to be a family. The legal process was not as simple as just signing a paper, as Jessica warned me. To terminate Kendra's rights, Amina, we have to prove we tried to contact her. She explained. We have to serve her. Serve her, Jessica? She's a ghost. She has not been seen in 8 years. Jessica nodded, already ahead of me. I know. So, the law has a provision. We serve her at her last known address. When that fails, we serve her closest known relatives, your parents. I felt the air leave my lungs in a sharp gasp. You're telling them? A new, blinding panic set in. My God, Jessica, they'll fight it. They'll show up just to spite me. They'll tell Kendra. Jessica held up a calm hand. Amina, it is a legal requirement. We have to send a certified letter, return receipt requested, to their Buckhead address. It's just a formality. A week later, Jessica called. Amina, she said, her voice neutral. I have the delivery confirmation. It was signed for by M. Reed Maria Reed. So, they knew. They officially, legally knew that I was moving to make my son truly, legally mine. The next 2 months of waiting for the court date were agony. I was a wreck. I kept expecting the phone to ring, expecting a lawyer's letter, expecting them to show up at my door to use this final act of stability as leverage to destroy the life I had built. The day in court was cold and gray. I had dressed Leo, now 8, in a little blue suit. He looked so grown up, quietly reading a Captain Underpants book in the massive, echoing hallway of the Fulton County Courthouse, completely oblivious to the gravity of the moment. I, on the other hand, felt like I was going to be sick. I kept looking at the double doors at the end of the hall, expecting them to burst open, expecting to see my mother's disapproving face, my father's cold glare. All rise, the bailiff called. We went in. The courtroom was almost empty. Just us, Jessica, a kind-looking judge with tired eyes and a court stenographer. The judge read the petition. Case number 2018 AD, 91 inches, the matter of the termination of parental rights for Kendra Reed. She looked up over her glasses at the empty room. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of Miss Kendra Reed? Silence. A deep, heavy, absolute silence. I held my breath. No one. Not a single person. Not Kendra. Not David. Not Maria. They had received the legal notification. They knew the exact date and time, and they had chosen not to come. They did not care enough to even make a phone call to protest. Their absence was the final, resounding, definitive. He's your burden. It was their implied consent. The judge looked at the file. The court notes the certified notification was delivered and signed. The parties have failed to appear. The petition is uncontested. The parental rights of Kendra Reed are hereby terminated effective immediately. She looked at me, and her stern face softened into a smile. And the petition for adoption by Miss Amina Reed is granted. Congratulations, Mom. I burst into tears. Not quiet tears, but huge, gasping sobs of 8 years of pent-up fear and exhaustion. I pulled Leo into my arms. It's official, baby. I cried into his hair. It's official. You're Leo Reed. You're my son. I walked out of that courthouse holding my son's hand. He was Leo Reed. I was his mother legally, officially. Finally. I thought it was the end. I thought the fortress was finally secure. I thought we were free. I had no idea how terribly, brutally wrong I was. 2 years. 2 years of blessed, profound, absolute silence after the adoption. The final invisible thread connecting me to them was severed, and in that silence, we bloomed. I was 38 years old now. Leo was 10. He was no longer a baby, but a bright, funny, Sharp-witted boy, obsessed with coding, of all things. He read at a high school level and argued with me about network security. Read analytics, my little computer job, was no longer a limping, one-woman operation. It was a thriving, six-figure consultancy. I had an office in Alpharetta. I had 2 employees. I had respect. And we had this house, a solid brick house on a quiet, tree-lined street with good schools. It was the fortress I promised us, built not of anger, but of late nights, good data, and sheer, unadulterated willpower. This was our life now. It was a Sunday in May. The windows were open. I could smell my neighbor's barbecue. I was sitting at my kitchen island, not frantically working, but peacefully reviewing a financial report. A cup of good coffee in my hand. In the backyard, I could hear the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of a basketball on the driveway. Leo was practicing. There was no screaming, no tension, no fear. There was just peace, an earned peace. And then the doorbell rang. It was not a frantic 2 a.m. pounding. It was a polite, civilized ding-dong. I put my coffee down, annoyed at the interruption. I walked to the front door, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors I had picked out myself. I looked through the peephole and I froze. Everything in me, my blood, my breath, my heart turned to cold, hard ice. It was her. I had not seen her face in 10 years, not since she was a 6-year-old strung-out mess. But it was her. Kendra. She was 36 now. She looked different. The life she had lived was written all over her face, but it was covered in thick layers of cheap foundation. Her hair was a brittle, bleached blonde. She was wearing a tight, designer knockoff dress that was completely inappropriate for a Sunday afternoon. Her eyes, though her eyes were exactly the same, empty, vacant, and she was not alone. Standing next to her, with one hand possessively on her arm, was a man. He was maybe 38, 40. He was white. He wore a shiny, ill-fitting polyester suit that looked like it was trying and failing to be expensive. He had a weak chin and a smile that was less a smile and more of a sneer. His name, I would soon learn, was Chad Peterson. He was exactly the kind of bottom-feeding predator I knew Kendra would attract. I stood there for a full 30 seconds, my hand on the doorknob, the ice in my veins turning into cold, hard steel. This was not a social call. This was not an I'm sorry. This was an invasion. I finally, slowly opened the door. Kendra flinched when she saw me. She actually took a step back. I just stood there, my face blank. I said nothing. The silence stretched thick and heavy. "Amina," she finally whispered, her voice raspy, unfamiliar. "Hi, Kendra," I said. My voice was not warm. It was not welcoming. It was the voice I used on clients who were trying to break a contract. It was flat, final. "What are you doing here?" The man, Chad, stepped forward, physically moving in front of Kendra, puffing out his chest. He was the new mouthpiece. "Hey," he said, the smirk widening, showing teeth that were a little too yellow. "That's no way to greet your sister, is it?" "I'm Chad Peterson." He stuck out a clammy hand. I ignored it. "We're married," he announced, as if presenting a prize. "Lawfully. 6 months." He pulled Kendra tight against his side. She looked like a doll, her eyes darting between me and him, terrified. "Amina," Kendra said, her voice a little stronger, like she was reading a script. "I'm sober. I've been clean for a whole year. I've remade my life. Sober." Of course, the magic word. The word that was supposed to erase 10 years of silence, 10 years of raising the son she had abandoned. The word that was supposed to make me forget. I was not impressed. I had seen her sober 3 times before, right before she relapsed and stole my grandmother's jewelry. I'm a different person now, Amina," she continued. "I found God. Chad helped me." "That's right," Chad said, his voice dripping with cheap televangelist confidence. He looked past me into my clean, well-lit foyer, his eyes scanning my possessions. I could practically see the dollar signs clicking in his greedy head. He looked at me, his eyes finally settling on my face, and the smirk became a look of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "And we're here," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. "To see the boy." I almost laughed. It was such a hollow, bitter sound. "The boy," I repeated, the casual, dismissive way he said it, like Leo was a piece of lost luggage they were coming to claim. The rage I had held back, the cold analytical steel. It all just solidified. I looked past Chad, my eyes locking on my sister. "You," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "do not have a boy here. You do not have a son here, Kendra." Her face instantly crumpled. Chad's face darkened. "Hey, now listen," he started. I cut him off. "No, you listen," I said, stepping forward. I was no longer the scared 2 8-year-old. I was a 3 8-year-old homeowner, a CEO, and a mother. I was the fortress. "You gave up that right 10 years ago," I said, my voice never rising, on a dirty welcome mat in the rain with a note written in eyeliner. "You do not get to come back a decade later with a new accessory." I glanced pointedly at Chad. "And act like you have any claim. He's my son." Kendra suddenly shrieked, the mask of the sober woman cracking, showing the desperate, selfish person I always knew. "No." "No," I said, my voice like a gavel. "He is my son legally, officially. His name is Leo Reed. My name is on the birth certificate. You do not exist." Chad's face turned red, a blotchy, ugly color. "Now you see here," he snarled, taking a step toward me. "We know our rights. We are family, and you can't just keep a child from his real mother. We're here to see him. We're not leaving." I just looked at him. I did not flinch. I did not back down. I pulled my phone from my back pocket. My fingers knew the numbers. "You have exactly 10 seconds to get off my property," I said, my voice as cold as the grave, "before I call Alpharetta police and have you removed for trespassing." He froze. He was a bully, and bullies are cowards. He had expected the old Amina, the one who would cry, the one who would fold. He had not expected this. He had expected the old Amina, the one who would cry, the one who would fold. "You'll regret this," he finally shouted at me, backing down the walkway, pulling a crying Kendra with him. He was a cornered rat, spitting and desperate. "You can't do this. Your parents warned us. They warned us you were a selfish bitch." That was it. The final, horrifying piece of the puzzle, the missing link. My parents? "You'll be hearing from our lawyer," he screamed from the sidewalk. "You haven't heard the last of us." I did not say a word. I just watched them scramble to their old, beat-up BMW. And then I shut my solid oak door. I engaged the deadbolt, and I leaned against it, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with the cold, hard certainty of a coming war. The peace was over. I was still shaking, not from fear, but from a deep, profound, justified rage. I had locked the deadbolt, engaged the security system, and put Leo in his room with his headphones and his favorite video game. He knew something was terribly wrong. He had seen the cold mask on my face, but I could not bring myself to explain that the monsters were real, and they had just been on our clean suburban doorstep. I was standing in my kitchen, my hands gripping the cold granite countertop, just trying to force my breathing to return to normal. The peace of my Sunday, the peace I had spent 10 agonizing years building, had been shattered in less than 5 minutes. It was gone, replaced by the familiar, bitter, coppery taste of my family's toxicity. And then my phone rang. It was sitting on the counter, and it vibrated a harsh, angry buzz against the stone. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. My blood, which was already simmering, ran cold. They would not this fast. I pressed ignore. The screen went dark, and before a second could pass, it lit up again. Unknown number ringing again immediately. This was not a sales call. This was not a wrong number. This was an ambush. This was a follow-up attack. With a deep breath, I swiped to accept the call. I did not say hello. I just waited, holding the phone to my ear, listening to the dead air. Then I heard a voice that I had not heard in 5 years. A voice I had blocked. A voice I had deleted. A voice that had died to me in the Eggleston Hospital waiting room. "Amina," she said. I said nothing. "Amina Reed," she shrieked. And the venom, the pure, undiluted fury in her voice was so potent, it felt like a physical blow. "How dare you? It was my mother, Maria. How dare you call the police on your own sister?" She screamed into the phone. "My neighbor saw the car. You embarrassed her. You embarrassed him. After everything she has been through, after all the hard work she has done to rebuild her life." I was stunned into silence. "What are you talking about, Mom?" I finally managed to say. "Do not mom me," she yelled. "That girl has changed. She is a different person. She is sober. She has a wonderful, supportive new husband, Chad. He is a good man. He is a manager." And there it was. My mother's voice was filled with this strange, twisted pride. I could hear the unspoken, true word, the currency of their warped world. He's white. In my mother's world, the world of the black upper middle class and buckhead respectability, that was the ultimate prize. And my sister, Kendra, the family's greatest failure, had just landed the ultimate symbol of status. It did not matter if he was a bottom feeder in a polyester suit, which I was sure he was white. And in my mother's eyes, that single fact had redeemed Kendra. It had washed away the addiction, the theft, the abandonment. It proved that Kendra had finally leveled up, and I, by threatening to call the police, had threatened that new, fragile, respectable image. I had embarrassed the white man. The sheer, layered hypocrisy made me physically sick. This was not a mother calling to check on her daughter after a confrontation. This was a co-conspirator calling to scold me for ruining the plan. This was not a random call. This was calculated. And that is when the coldest, hardest realization hit me. How did you even get this number? I asked, my voice flat, deadly. And how did they find my house? The silence on the other end was my answer. You, I said, the word heavy as a stone after 5 years of absolute silence. You gave them my address, didn't? Of course I gave it to them, she shrieked, shameless. She is his mother. She has a right. A right? I said, my voice dangerously low. A right she gave up 10 years ago, Mom. A right you didn't care about when you hung up on me at the hospital. I heard a sharp intake of breath. I had hit the nerve, the one scar they thought was invisible. You are a cruel, selfish girl, Amina, she hissed, reverting to the familiar childhood abuse. You always have been, hiding away in your big house, hoarding that child, thinking you are better than us. I am better than this, I said. Now get off my phone. But I heard a muffled sound, a man's voice in the background. Give me the phone, Maria. She's clearly not listening to you. The phone was fumbled, and a new voice came on the line. A voice I had not heard in 5 years, but one that I instantly recognized as the root of all my pain. My father, David Reed. Amina, he barked. No greeting, just a command. Stop this. Nonsense. Nonsense? I repeated. That's what you call this? Nonsense? Do not get legalistic with me, young lady. I am your father. I am telling you right now, you are making a terrible mistake. You had no right to keep that child. I could not believe what I was hearing. I had no right? I had the right of a decent human being. I had the right of the woman who found him freezing on a doorstep while you and Mom were hiding in Buckhead. We were protecting this family, he roared, his voice thick with the desperation of a man trying to justify a decade of betrayal. We were protecting you from a scandal, and this is how you repay us? You stole that child, Amina. You took advantage of your sister's illness, her weakest moment, and you stole him from her. That was it. That was the word that broke me. Stole. I screamed. The rage I had been suppressing for a decade finally erupted, a volcano of pure, unadulterated fury. I stole him? I was the one who was up every 2 hours. I was the one who held him when his fever hit 104. I was the one who paid for the goddamn meningitis scare alone while you were at a luncheon. The words poured out of me, hot as tears. I am the one who built a life for him, who taught him to read, who paid for his school, who loved him. Where were you? Where were you? You were calling him a burden. You were calling me selfish. You paid her to leave, and you call me the thief. There was silence. I had finally said it all. I had said the unspeakable, the 10-year-old truth. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer yelling. It was colder. It was deadlier. We did what we had to do, he said, his voice a flat, cold line. We protected you, and now you have gone too far. You have pushed this too far. Blood is blood. Amina, that boy is a Reed whether you like it or not, and his mother wants to see him. His family wants to see him. You are going to let Kendra and Chad sit down with that boy. You are going to be civil. Or as God is my witness, I will make you regret the day you ever thought you could cross me. This will not stand. The line went dead. It was not a plea. It was not a discussion. It was a threat. 2 weeks. That is how long I lived in the shadow of that devastating, cold threat. 2 weeks of hell. I did not sleep. I drank coffee until my hands shook. I put Leo on the bus to school and then watched the street for their beat-up BMW. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. I called Jessica Hayes, my lawyer, and told her everything. leaving out no detail of their decade of cruelty. She was tactical, furious on my behalf. "Let them come," she said, her voice sharp and steady. "They have no case. The adoption is sealed. It's final. They are blowing smoke, Amina. They are just trying to scare you." She was right about the law, but I was still scared of the maliciousness they represented. I was at my office, my real office in Alpharetta, trying desperately to focus on a new client's data set. I was staring at a spreadsheet but seeing my father's cold, commanding face. My assistant, Maya, buzzed my intercom. "Amina, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a man here for you. He says he has a delivery." I frowned. "I didn't order anything, Maya." "He says it's personal," she said, her voice sounding nervous. "He's a process server." The blood drained from my face. They did it. Send him in. The man was nondescript, wearing a polo shirt. He looked bored. "Amina Reed?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me a thick, folded stack of documents. "You've been served." He turned and walked out. I just stood there, my hand frozen, holding the papers. I walked back to my desk, my legs feeling like they were not connected to my body. I unfolded the thick, official-looking document, my eyes scanning the dense legal jargon. Petition, Fulton County Superior Court. And then I saw it. The names, the plaintiffs. My eyes jumped past the first two names, the ones I was expecting. Kendra Peterson, Chad Peterson, and then my world, which was already cracked, split wide open. There were two more names on the plaintiff's line. David Reed and Maria Reed. It was not just them. It was all of them. My own parents were suing me. They were suing me to take my son. I sank into my chair, my vision tunneling as I read the accusation, the legal grounds for their monstrous case. They were petitioning to overturn the adoption. They were accusing me of fraud, of undue influence, and the line that made me want to be sick. Intentional emotional alienation of the minor child from his loving biological family. "Jessica," I said, my voice a dead monotone into the phone. "They did it. They're all suing me." There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. "Amina, what are the grounds?" I read her the line. "Fraud, alienation," Jessica said, her voice turning to steel. "That's insane. It's impossible. The adoption is 2 years old. It's sealed. They have no standing. They were served the first time and didn't show up. What do they think they're doing?" I stared at the paper. "They're doing exactly what he said they'd do," I whispered. "They're making me regret it." And that is when the real question hit me, the one that terrified me more than the lawsuit itself. They had no legal standing. They had no money. They had no case. So why? Why now? Why do this scorched earth attack after 10 years of silence? Unless there was something new. Unless they knew something I did not. I was on the phone with Jessica, my hand gripping the receiver so hard my knuckles were white. The lawsuit papers were spread out on my desk, a sea of black and white jargon that felt like a death threat. "Jessica," I said, my voice steadying. "They have no money." "What?" she asked. "They have no money," I repeated, standing up and walking to my office window. "I know my father's real estate business. It's leveraged to the hilt. He's drowning in debt. My mother's respectable life is built on credit. And Kendra and that Chad, he's a shift manager at a rental car kiosk at the airport." Jessica was silent, processing the damning financial data. "So," I continued, forcing the terrifying conclusion into the light, "how are they paying for a high-powered, high-risk lawsuit like this? A lawsuit to unseal a finalized adoption? That's not cheap. That's a $100,000 fight." "A lawyer working on contingency," Jessica whispered, the realization dawning on her. "They found a lawyer who's working for a piece of the pie." "Exactly," I said. "A lawyer only works on contingency if they expect a massive payday. The lawsuit isn't the cost. The lawsuit is the key. They're not spending money, Jessica. They're trying to get money." "Get what money?" Jessica asked. "Your company, Reed Analytics, is successful, but it's not sue your own family successful." "No," I said, looking out at the Alpharetta trees. "It's not about me. It's about Leo." I was pacing now, my mind racing back 10 years ago, back to the fights I'd had with Kendra before she vanished, back to her crying in her trash-filled apartment. "She was terrified," I whispered. "She was running from someone." "Who?" "She told me about a guy," I said, my mind digging for the memory. "A rich guy, a tech guy." She said he was powerful, that he'd ruin her. I thought she was just being dramatic. I thought it was another one of her stories. I stopped pacing. I sat down at my computer. I need to go, Jessica. I need to run some numbers. Amina, what are you? I'll call you back, I said, and hung up. I was not a mother, not a victim, not a sister. I was a data analyst, and I was on the hunt. I opened a new secure browser. I did not search for Kendra Reed. I did not search for Chad Peterson. I searched for the only piece of data I had. A name. A name she had sobbed into a pillow one night. A name I had dismissed and forgotten until this very second. She said he was a J. Jason Julian. That was it. Julian. Julian Croft. I typed the name into the search bar. Julian Croft. And I pressed enter. The screen did not just fill. It exploded. My heart did not just stop. It felt like it had been ripped from my chest. This was not some small-time tech bro. This was the Julian Croft, the reclusive, eccentric genius, billionaire founder of Aperture AI, the man whose software was probably running the very search engine I was using. And the first headline, dated 6 months ago, screamed in bold black letters, Tech Titan, Julian Croft dead at 52. I will continue the script, ensuring Chapter 14 is approximately 1,000 words, maintains Amina's analytic, angry, and triumphant internal monologue, and follows the narrative from the outline. Viral script, he's your burden. Now, Chapter 14, the final addendum, and the trap approx. 1,000 words. My blood ran cold. I clicked the link, my hand shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. Died suddenly. Massive heart attack. I scrolled. Down, my eyes scanning the article so fast I was barely breathing, looking for one phrase, and I found it. A gossip piece from a business journal dated 3 months ago. The $500 million estate. Who gets Julian Croft's fortune? The article confirmed the rumors. Croft, who had no known heirs, left a famously complex will, but rumors are circulating of a possible illegitimate child. I pushed back from my desk, my chair slamming into the wall. It all clicked into place. The dates, the timeline, the sheer naked, horrifying logic of it. Julian Croft dies 6 months ago. The news of a $500 million estate with a possible heir hits the news 3 months ago. And 1 month ago, my sober sister and her polyester suit-wearing husband show up on my doorstep. Chad, that bottom feeder, must have read the news. He must have done the math. He had realized his new, strung-out wife's abandoned baby was not a burden. He was a lottery ticket. A $500 million lottery ticket. Oh my God, I whispered, to the empty room. They're not suing me for Leo. They're suing me for his money. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling to call Jessica back, to scream, to tell her to panic. Jessica, I said, my voice trembling. I know why they're suing. It's not about custody. It's about money. It's $500 million. Leo's biological father was Julian Croft. There was a sharp, terrified silence on the other end. Amina, Jessica said, and I could hear the panic in her voice now. Oh no. Oh God, this is bad. This is very bad. What do you mean? I asked, my own fear rising. Amina, they're going to argue fraud. Jessica's voice was rapid fire. They're going to say you knew. They're going to say you knew about this inheritance when you filed for adoption 2 years ago. They'll say you intentionally concealed the child's massive financial status from the court. They'll say that's the fraud. They'll say you did it just to control the money. Amina, a judge might listen to that. I was choking. I could not breathe. She was right. They had a weapon. They could paint me as a liar, a manipulator, a gold digger, the very things they were. My whole life, my fortress, my company, it was all about to crumble. I was pacing my office, my vision tunneling. No, I said, stopping. The panic. It was receding. It was being replaced by something else. A cold, hard, familiar feeling. The feeling I got when I found the $50,000 receipt. The feeling I got when I blocked my mother's number. Amina, what? Jessica said, her voice still frantic. They can't win, I said. They won't win. How do you know? They'll say you hid. They don't know everything, Jessica, I said, and my voice was suddenly calm. The shaking had stopped. They think they're the only ones who read the news. They don't know the real story. I walked over to the bookshelf in my office. I pulled out a thick volume on data structures. And behind it, I activated the keypad for the small, fireproof wall safe I had, installed 2 years ago. Julian Croft didn't just die, I said, my voice steady. He found me a year before he passed. He was smart, Jessica. He ran his own data. He was a billionaire for a reason. He found me and he found Leo. I remembered the meeting. A quiet park in Alpharetta. Not a billionaire, just a man with tired, kind eyes watching his 10-year-old son play. He met him, I said, my voice thick with the memory. He met Leo. And I told him everything. I told him about Kendra. I told him about my parents. I showed him the $50,000 receipt. I played him the burden phone call. He was a data analyst, Your Honor. He understood patterns. He knew exactly what kind of people they were. And Julian Croft, he was a very, very careful man. He did not just leave a will, Jessica. He left an insurance policy. My fingers closed around a thick, sealed manila envelope. The one he had given me. The one that said, "Do not open unless they come for him." Julian left me a weapon, I said. He called it his contingency plan. I call it the trap. And my family, my greedy, stupid, monstrous family, they just walked right into it. The Fulton County Superior Courthouse is not a warm place. It is all marble and dark wood and cold, echoing silence. I sat next to my lawyer, Jessica. My hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. Across the aisle they sat, a united, horrifying front. Kendra dressed in a modest pale blue dress, looking like a church choir member. Chad, her white husband, in his shiniest suit, looking protective, a righteous man defending his new wife. And my parents, David and Maria Reed. They looked like they were attending a funeral. Pained, somber, dignified. They looked like the victims. The judge, a sharp woman named Judge Alston, looked over the case. "We are here," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "on the petition of Kendra Peterson, Chad Peterson, David Reed and Maria Reed to vacate a finalized adoption based on allegations of fraud." I felt sick. "Let them talk," Jessica whispered. "Let them lie. Every word is a shovel, and they are digging their own graves." Their lawyer called his first witness, my sister Kendra. She glided to the stand, her hand trembling just enough for the judge to see. She took the oath. She lied. She sobbed a performance of postpartum depression, claiming she went to me for help, begging me to watch him just until I can get on my feet. And then she cut me off. Kendra cried, her voice rising in a performance of pure betrayal. She vanished. She changed her number. She moved away. She stole my son. My father was called next. He walked up not as a father but as the CEO he was. He looked respectable, pained, like the voice of reason. He lied, claiming I was difficult and held grudges. He claimed that when Kendra made her mistake, I did not see a cry for help. I saw an opportunity to take something. "We are not here for money," my father lied, looking the judge dead in the eye. "We are here for our grandson. We just want what's best for him. We want him to know his real family, his whole family. He was good. He was believable. He was the successful, respectable, heartbroken patriarch, tearing apart his family because of his difficult daughter." Then, Jessica stood up. She was not a performer. She was a surgeon. "Miss Peterson," she said, her voice calm, asking Kendra to return to the stand. "Were you lost and confused 2 days later?" Jessica asked, her voice like ice. "When you flew to Los Angeles and accepted a wire transfer for $50,000. Chad sat up. My father stopped breathing. "This is a bank statement from an account belonging to Amina Reed," Jessica said, holding up the evidence. "An account that shows a $50,000 withdrawal authorized by David Reed and transferred to your new account in Los Angeles 2 days after you abandoned your son. Miss Peterson, you did not ask for help. You were paid to disappear, and you used your sister's own savings to do it." My father, David Reed, was called back. "A burden, Mr. Reed?" Jessica asked. And then she played the tape. The sound of my father's voice 10 years ago filled the silent courtroom, cold, hard, furious. "She chose your door, Amina. That makes it your problem. He is your burden now. Do not call this house about this again." Then she played the second recording, my mother's voice cold and sharp from the Eggleston Hospital call. "Amina, I am in the middle of my annual Women's Club luncheon. I cannot just leave. You are always so dramatic. Stop being selfish. You chose him. Now you handle it." The courtroom was dead silent. My parents, they were exposed, not as loving grandparents but as the monsters they truly were. The lawyer, desperate, looked up. Your Honor, he shouted. This is not what this case is about. Judge Alston looked at him, her eyes like chips of ice. Then what exactly is this case about, counselor? Backed into a corner, the lawyer, blinded by greed, blurted out the truth. It's about the child's rights, his rights to his legacy, his $500 million inheritance from the estate of the late Julian Croft. Boom. The motive was exposed. Judge Alston stared at them all, seeing the whole greedy picture. She turned her entire body toward me. Miss Reed, she said, her voice quiet, analytical. You heard the plaintiff's counsel. He has made a very serious accusation that you knew of this massive inheritance and concealed it from the court when you filed for adoption 2 years ago. I took a breath. I stood up. I did not look at my family. I looked only at the judge. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and steady. I knew. And I also knew this day would come because Julian Croft knew. I reached down into the briefcase at my feet. He knew that the moment he died, that the moment his name was connected to an inheritance, that the vipers would come. He anticipated this exact lawsuit, and he prepared for it. He asked me to give this to the presiding judge, and only the judge, in the event that any member of Kendra Reed's biological family ever tried to contest my custody of Leo. I walked forward and handed the sealed manila envelope to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. Judge Alston took a letter opener and slit the wax seal. She pulled out a thick-bound document. It was a legally binding addendum to the last will and testament of Julian Croft. She began to read, her eyes scanning faster. I watched her face. Her eyes widened. She looked up from the paper, her gaze sweeping over Kendra, Chad, David, and Maria. Her expression was not just angry. It was one of pure, profound disbelief. Miss Reed, she asked, her voice hushed with the weight of what she was reading. Do they have any idea what this is? Do they know what you have? No, Your Honor, I said. They do not. The judge shook her head as if to clear it. She looked back at the plaintiffs. You people, you are truly unbelievable. She took a deep breath. This, she said, holding up the document, is a legally binding addendum to the last will and testament of Julian Croft, authenticated, notarized, and filed with his estate. She began to read aloud. First, I, Julian Croft, confirm that Leo Reed is my biological son. Second, I bequeath my entire estate, valued at approximately $500 million, to be placed into a secured, ironclad trust for my son, Leo Reed, to be managed solely by his legal and only mother, Miss Amina Reed, until his 25th birthday. Chad's hungry grin widened. He thought he had won. And third, the judge said, her voice dropping, her eyes locking onto my family. However, that one word, the word the trap sprung on, hung in the air. In the event that any member of Leo's biological mother's family, specifically named as Kendra Reed, Chad Peterson, David Reed, or Maria Reed, ever attempts to contest the custody of Amina Reed, or attempts to interfere with her management of the trust, or files any legal action to that effect, the judge paused, and then delivered the final, fatal line. 99.9% of the entire $500 million estate is to be immediately and irrevocably liquidated from Leo's trust and redirected to a charitable foundation for abandoned children to be managed again by Miss Amina Reed. Silence. Utter, complete, deafening silence. Chad's smile was gone, frozen on his face, his brain trying desperately to catch up. No, Chad finally screamed, leaping up from his chair. No, that's illegal. You can't do that. Kendra let out a sound I had never heard before, a long, high-pitched wail as she realized what had just happened, and she slid boneless from the bench in a dead faint. My mother just made a small, choked sound. My father just stared. He finally understood. They had not just lost their payday. Their greed, their attack, their malicious lawsuit had just cost my son $500 million. They had done it. Order! Judge Alston boomed, gaveling over Chad's screams. Order in the court. Your petition, she said, her voice dripping with absolute contempt, is not just dismissed. It is dismissed with prejudice. I am finding you all in contempt. This was a frivolous, malicious, and greedy abuse of the court system. She looked at me, and her face softened just for a second. Miss Reed, you are free to go with your son. The most powerful lesson from this story is that true strength often looks like quiet diligence. My family saw me as a burden, but they never saw me as a data analyst. I didn't just endure, I documented. I saved the bank statement. I saved the audio files. I built my life on truth while they built theirs on lies and respectability. The ultimate payoff wasn't just the justice in court. It was the revelation that their own greed was the trap. They were so blinded by the $500 million, they destroyed themselves. Have you ever had to be the responsible one in your family? And how did you finally build your own fortress? Share your story in the comments below.